The first sign of trouble with Roman money did not appear in an imperial decree or in the ledgers of a mint. It appeared in the marketplace, in the small hesitation before an ordinary sale was completed. A customer holds out a silver coin for bread, and the seller, instead of taking it, turns it over, weighs it in his hand, and looks a moment longer than is required. Nothing about the bread has changed. The doubt is about the coin. That hesitation is where the history of Roman inflation actually lives. We tend to describe inflation as a rise in prices, and in the end, it is. But underneath the prices lies something harder to measure: the confidence that a coin accepted today will still be accepted at something like the same value tomorrow. Roman coinage worked only as long as that confidence held. When it began to weaken, the effect spread far beyond the mint to taxation, wages, trade, and the daily business of buying food.
Rome needed reliable money on an enormous scale. Legions had to be paid on frontiers thousands of miles from the capital. Taxes had to be gathered from provinces stretched around the Mediterranean and through countless intermediaries. Merchants carried grain, oil, and manufactured goods between regions that never saw one another, and the crowded cities of the empire depended on markets they could not do without. In a system of that size, a coin was not merely a token of imperial power stamped with the emperor's face. It was a promise that the next person would accept it too, and that promise was the quiet machinery on which the whole economy ran. The difficulty was that the empire was expensive, and its revenues were rarely equal to its ambitions. Wars, frontier defense, civil conflict, building programs, and the cost of buying loyalty pressed constantly on imperial finances. Raising taxes was visible and dangerous. Altering the coin was neither. Under Nero, after the Great Fire of Rome in July 64 CE and the enormous rebuilding that followed, the denarius was reduced from roughly 3.9 grams of silver to about 3.4.
Ancient writers remembered the fire for its devastation and for the scale of Nero's response. The coinage preserved a quieter part of the same pressure in the smaller amount of silver left inside the empire's most important silver coin. It still carried the emperor's likeness, and for a time it passed from hand to hand as though continuity had been preserved. But the relationship between the coin's official appearance and its material content had begun to loosen, and later rulers, facing pressures of their own, would return to the same solution.
Over the next 2 centuries, the silver drained out of the currency. The decline turned into a collapse during the crises of the 3rd century, when emperors rose and fell in quick succession, and each needed to pay the armies that made and unmade them. By the reign of Gallienus, the coin that still bore the old silver tradition had become base metal beneath a thin silver wash, a bright surface over a body that was mostly bronze. The form of the money survived, but its substance had almost entirely gone.
The change did not stay hidden inside the coin. Tacitus records that the peoples beyond the Rhine preferred older Roman coins to newer ones, choosing the money struck in better days over the money coming fresh from the mint. That preference is the historian's evidence that quality had become visible. People were now comparing coins, ranking them, and treating some as more trustworthy than others, and they were doing it far from any office that would have admitted a problem existed. Once a society starts sorting its money into what is officially valid and what is genuinely trusted, the problem stops being metallurgical and becomes human. A merchant taking payment has reason to look harder at every coin. A household paid in mixed currency has reason to keep the heavier, older pieces and pass on the lighter ones. Good coin is quietly withdrawn and hidden away. Weak coin is spent quickly before it can lose more of its standing. Bargaining grows more cautious, exchange more guarded, and prices begin to climb, not by decree, but through thousands of small defensive decisions. Long before any figure could be tabulated, people had already changed how they saved, sold, and paid. By the end of the 3rd century, the disorder was severe enough to force the state's hand in the open. In 301, Diocletian issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, setting legal ceilings on a sweeping list of goods and wages across the empire, and threatening severe penalties for those who exceeded them. A government does not attempt to fix the price of everything, from grain to a day's labour, because its markets are calm. It does so because it has concluded that ordinary exchange is no longer holding together.
The force of law was not enough. Lactantius, writing not long after, describes goods vanishing from the market, violence in enforcement, and prices that refused to obey. Within a few years, the edict was effectively a dead letter. The state could carve prices into stone across the empire, but it could not legislate the belief that made money work. Where people no longer trusted the coin enough to accept the official valuations, no penalty could conjure that trust back into being. The trouble did not begin when prices were visibly higher. It began when the assumptions that made a coin ordinary and dependable started to give way, and when people began rebuilding their habits around that uncertainty. The seller who paused over the coin in the marketplace was not really reacting to the price of bread. He was reacting to a question about what the coin still meant, what others would make of it, and what it would buy when he came to spend it. Inflation, seen through Rome, is less a movement in numbers than the slow failure of the trust that lets money be money at all.